This presentation is going to cover solar energy economics in Nebraska and be an overview of economics predominantly of grid-tied electric systems for businesses and residential applications. We're going to cover a little bit about policy, how photovoltaic systems work, and solar energy both in residential and agricultural systems, and including tax credits, depreciation incentives, and energy savings. This presentation is not meant to give you advice on financial matters, but it will give you some insight into how these systems work and some general concepts of their economics. Let's talk a little bit about energy in the world. Electrical energy is increasing in the world. That is increasing with population, as well as we're electrifying many things and using electricity for more things. You can see here the increase, particularly in China and Asia, but it's increased in the United States. Our use of electricity has year over year, and so have the prices. Generally, if we look at the United States today, predominantly coal, natural gas, and nuclear are our three largest contributors, but the renewables are growing and growing fairly quickly. You can see in the western part of the United States, hydroelectric is a major source of their electricity, while those of us in the eastern part of the United States still rely on coal, natural gas, and nuclear pretty heavily. In Nebraska, coal still dominates for our total production, with nuclear has a substantial piece, and that's true even with some of the changes in the facility north of Omaha closing. We're still going to have a substantial piece of nuclear because of the bigger plant in southeast Nebraska running at a fairly high capacity factor. Wind is increasing over time, and solar is going to increase, but it's still a small piece and will remain fairly small for the time being. This is a really critical piece when you're considering a solar electric system. Is you want to really examine what are your goals for that system, and that's going to really help you to think about what economics is good enough for you. For example, if you want a system because it can create green electricity and it's clean and it's part of the solution to becoming cleaner and having less pollution from our electrical system, then maybe the economics aren't as critical, and payback isn't as big of a concern as if your interest is in an investment. So you really want to consider what are your goals for this. Some people really want that energy. They want to produce their own energy. They want to feel independent. And again, those are situations where maybe the economics aren't as critical than others. Maybe you need electricity. You have a remote system. Maybe you've got a cabin somewhere that it's far enough away from the electrical grid that extending the electrical grid is costly. Well, there I might be able to justify a system that's not connected to the grid at all. And so those systems are going to have different criteria than a residential system, but we got to really figure out what the goals are. Marketing. If I want my business to appear green, then not only might I consider a system, but I also am going to consider that I want people to see that system. Maybe I want to have it on a roof that people can see, or something like that. I don't want to hide it. Investment, this is where it's very critical to look at the economics and say, are the economics good enough to justify me doing this? Is payback a low enough number of years that I can do it? And that's up to you, but this presentation will help you make some of those decisions. Energy policy is unpredictable. Energy policy is unpredictable today. It was unpredictable in previous administrations as well. We don't know how things are going to happen. And the first one on the list is a good example, the Clean Power Plan, where it was put forth by the EPA during the Obama administration, but was put on hold by the court system. And so, I mean, even in that sense, we don't know whether things are going to take place, and we've got to figure these things out. Now, under the new administration, the fate of the Clean Power Plan is still up in the air. I can tell you that I see, some general trends in energy that may continue with or without the Clean Power Plan. But those things, they do have an impact, and we'll see what happens in the future. The tax credits aren't forever, and currently there is a tax credit for solar through 2019 at 30%, and then ratcheting down over a few years after that. But if we're looking at a small wind turbine, those tax credits went away at the end of 2016. So important things to consider. This is just some comparisons of energy prices across different forms of energy. I think this is interesting and can get us into some other discussions. But electricity is fairly high on a per million BTU basis, but of course electricity is also a very useful form of energy. I can do more things with electricity than I can with natural gas. So having it be more expensive is actually makes some sense in that sense. Want to just give a little bit of background. There is some federal laws that have been on the books for 30 or 40 years now. One of them is the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission Act, called PURPA, and it basically allows renewable systems to be put onto the grid or connect to the grid, no matter where they are in the United States. Obviously they have to meet the safety and other regulations that are with those local utilities, but you can hook a distributed renewable system to the grid no matter what utility you're in. So, can I do that in my location? Yes, you can. Federal law says so, but federal law doesn't give a lot of details with respect to other things other rules, and that's where laws like the net metering law we're going to discuss in a little bit have come to add more details to that. And so you can always do it, but with the net metering, the economics get a little bit better. Nebraska is a public power state. What I mean by that is simply that Nebraska is a public power state, and understanding that helps us understand a little bit about how our system works compared to other states, and how this is going to work with respect to installing a solar array. This is the statutes for public power generally, and I'd like to point out that I like to list them as it's fairly simple. There are two main goals: low cost electricity and reliable electricity. And when those are the statutes that are of great importance, sometimes renewables being a more intermittent source and sometimes more expensive don't fit into that real well. So this is where we have to think about renewables sometimes a little differently. The other thing about a public power state that is important to know is that we have exclusive retail areas, and so no matter what dot you put on the map in Nebraska, you can say this is the utility that services that location. And so if I live in Norris Public Power service area, I'm serviced by Norris Public Power. That's just an example. I just picked one off the top of my head, but it doesn't matter maybe that the avoided cost rate paid by another utility is better. If I'm in the service area of Norris, that's the one I'm going to deal with. So, call your local utility. That's the one you're going to deal with. Don't worry about what the other ones have or don't have. They do all have to play by the same rules when it comes to net metering, but how they define some of the terms is different. And so work with your local utility because that's the way it works here in Nebraska. If we're in another state, there are some places where you can choose a little bit more of your utility. And in that case, you might pick one that gives a certain deal or something like that. But we have exclusive service areas here, and that's what you're gonna encounter. Let's talk about solar a little bit. This is a solar photovoltaic array. Array is kind of the entire piece all put together, all the modules and racking and wires and all that all together. It's an array. That array is made up of modules. Some people call a module a panel, and I may do that as well. So I think those words are kind of synonymous, but when you get into the industry, they do call that a module. The module is made up of photovoltaic cells. Most modules are between 60 and 72 cells, are very common. And inside that cell, if we were to look inside, we would see silicon molecules. Those silicon molecules are special in the fact that when sunlight hits them, the electrons can get excited and move around, and that's the property that we want from that silicon crystal. We need to capture those electrons to get our electric current, and to capture them we need an electric field, and so we're going to create that permanent electric field within that silicon crystal using both phosphorus and boron to add impurities to that silicon. And so we are going to put some phosphorus in the upper layer, giving us an extra valence electron. We're going to put some boron in the lower layers, giving us an extra hole or lack of an electron. So by doing that, we're creating a net negative charge in the upper surface and a net positive charge in the lower surface. And interestingly, those are going to then migrate to the other direction. So the positive is going to pull the negative charge down, the negative is going to pull the positive charge up, and we're going to create a positive side, a negative side at what we're going to call the PN junction. N being for N-type silicon and P being for P-type silicon. So here's our silicon crystal with our N-type and P-type and our PN junction, and we're going to get some sunlight fly down and hit one of these electrons and cause it to be excited, but we need somewhere for that electron to go, so we're going to put a little metal strip in there, and that's going to be the little metal contact. And if you look at the surface of your solar panel, you'll see those little tiny metal strips in there, and that's that metallic contact. So here's our photon. It's going to fly in, going to excite that electron. The electron's going to flow, give up its energy to the light, and then it's going to continue on and flow to the back. And so if we watch that again, that electron doesn't ever really get used up. It's just the energy that was given to it from the sun gets used, and then it fills in on the bottom. So now if we look at this in another way, there's another thing happening that I think is fun to learn about a little bit, and that we're going to create our solar cell again. The electron's going to fly in, the photon is going to fly in, the electron's going to move, but then there's this other red thing moving. So let's watch that again. The red thing is the hole left by the electron, and it is moving in the opposite direction. And so that hole is somewhat like a positive charge, and it's moving in the opposite direction. And what's fun about that is that although the electrons are traveling in a clockwise motion in our cell here, the holes are traveling in a counterclockwise direction, and the holes are actually the electric current. So the direction or movement of the holes is what we consider the direction or movement of electricity from positive to negative. And that is the case because of Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin observed that electricity flows from positive to negative, and he designated that direction, even though the reality is the electrons are flowing in the opposite direction. So kind of fun to learn about. This is when we look at the whole solar photovoltaic system as a whole, there's lots of pieces and parts, and we can't forget that there's multiple pieces and parts, because if we simply think that we have a module and an inverter and a disconnect and we're done, we're going to miss out on a bunch of stuff that costs money. So we have a module that has to be put on some racking. We have to have some PV wire, connect that to the inverter, which goes through the disconnect, and it has to go through some trenching to get to our meter, and we might have to do some electrical work to get a new meter. Sometimes we have combiner box to combine all the PV wire together, and I'm even missing a piece on this list, which is some of the grounding wire and grounding lugs and things that are needed. So we got to not forget that there's lots of pieces and parts to add up to the cost of that system. And although the module and the inverter are the two largest costs, there are other costs to the system. I'm going to go through some very basic concepts as far as how we're going to attach these systems to a house and to the grid. This is just a line diagram. It's missing all the details, but that's okay. And we have the solar modules, an inverter that turns the direct current electricity from the solar into AC. So this is the DC side, and this is the AC side that is good in-phase AC, ready to go onto the grid. And in this case, the electricity might flow from the solar, and if the house is using it, it flows directly into the house and is used by the house. If in the case that the load is too large for the solar, the electricity is going to flow both from the solar and from the grid at the same time. And at night, it's going to only flow from the grid. And maybe if during the day you left and turned almost everything off, the electricity is going to flow from the solar and go onto the grid. And so this would be a grid-tied photovoltaic system. It's the most common, the lowest cost because of it has fewer parts than other systems. And this is what most people are installing today. This would be a system with a battery backup, and this would be only in the case where I need to have some backup power when the grid is down that I might put this in. And I really like to kind of see people avoid this if possible, because the batteries do have a fairly large cost, and we have to replace them every 4 to 5 years, well, 5 or 6 or 7 years, whatever their lifespan is, but their lifespan is not as long as the solar itself. So there is some maintenance costs in that. And if all we're doing it for is the once every 5 years when the electrical grid goes down, we may want to consider not using a battery. But in the case that we do want that battery backup, I've added two pieces to the system, a charge controller and a battery. And I did add a disconnect at this location so that when the grid is down, I can throw this disconnect, throw it open, and then I can run my house directly from my system here. And even if the solar, even if it's at nighttime, I can come from the battery to the system. So that's a battery backup grid connected system, and there's not a lot of those around, but there is a few. In the case of off-grid, this would be maybe my remote cabin. I can do it a couple different ways, but this is a basic way where I've just got that charge controller, battery, and the inverter, and then my load. But in the case where maybe even I have a very simple cabin, maybe I just want to put in DC lighting and DC appliances, and then I might be able to just get away and not have the inverter at all. So there is options to do some different things in a remote system like that. This is mine. And I wanted just to show you this to you. I added a few more details just so that you could kind of see what I have. Mine's a little bit different, where I have two boxes at my house. One is in my garage and one's in my house. And it splits after the meter to go to those two different locations. So I have 14 modules, 320 watts each. My total rating is 4.480 under standard test conditions. And I go through an inverter, and I go through a disconnect, and so I'm DC over here, I'm AC over here, and this is a utility disconnect so that the utility, if they want to shut me off, they can do that. And then again, the electricity might flow from here into my house, it might flow into my garage, or I can get electricity from the meter to either my garage or my house, and the electricity then also could go out to the grid. So it's a grid-tied system. I have a single meter. This metering configuration could be 1 meter, 2, or something like that. I'm going to have 1 meter, and it's going to be called a bidirectional meter. So here's a few pictures of my system. Just to be short here, we're digging the foundations for the structure. And I joked that I hired a crew, but my crew like to take breaks. So here we are getting our system started. Here's just a few along the way in construction where we're getting the structural components put in place for that. This is also going to double as at least some basic storage for some things underneath where we might be able to park a tractor or something like that. Here's the roofing material we put on to make sure it was waterproof underneath. And then you can see here's the start of our racking system where we're using these feet to attach the rails to the system. Here we've got the actual rails put in place for getting ready for the solar to go on. Here's the solar installed and our conduit and DC going down into this inverter. This is the inverter while I'm wiring with the DC side, and the AC side. Here is the electricity flowing up through my utility disconnect, and this is the inverter when it's completed, and this is the disconnect when it was completed. This is my process, and your process will be different, and that's because your system is different, but your process will still follow these same steps. But if you hire a installer, they're likely going to do a bunch of these for you, and so you won't have to do all these. But because I installed my own system, these were my steps. And I will kind of add that there is an intermediate step, which is lots of thinking and planning up here, and making sure that I was able to fund this and had the space and things like that. Once I was confident in what I needed to do, I contacted my utility. I went through the design of the system. I ordered my solar modules, inverter mounting, etc. I went and got a building permit. I built the structure. I did the solar rail mounting. I used a company called Indirect, but there's other good solar rails companies out there. That's just one of them. I mounted the solar modules. I got an electrical permit. I did the DC wiring and grounding, the inverter installation, the AC wiring. Got the electrical inspector out to do the inspection. I had a signed the utility agreement with my utility, got a new bidirectional meter, and then turning it on. So those are the steps in my process. Let's talk about economics. This is really the importance, and this is one of the reasons why this is an interesting topic. Is that if we were looking at a system just 10 years ago, that system, the one that I just showed you, my system, is going to cost somewhere maybe $36,000, and so that's getting a little extreme, and I really wasn't going to be able to fund it. But you can look out here today where the cost of systems was between $8 to $10 a watt installed 10 years ago. Now today, I like to tell people that systems are between $2 and $3 a watt installed. So here we sit right here today. And because I did my installation, I did save a little bit, and some people are going to be able to do that, but not all. And I do recommend that knowing the electric code, knowing how to install those safely is a very critical piece to being able to do that. And most people, that's where the installer is very, very good at those sorts of things. So mine came in just under that, but so you can start to see that my system is much lower priced today than it would have been, and makes it makes this available to more people. And one of the reasons why you're watching this video now is that those prices are low enough that it's interesting to try to price those systems and decide if the economics are right for you. Solar panels have become solar cells have become more efficient over time, and really on the market solar panels today are really sitting in this range right here. And what's going to happen is they're going to just inch up over time. Okay, these ones that are up here are very specialized, multi-layer solar cells, and I don't see them coming into the market for residential systems or even commercial systems very fast, but we're going to start working our way up. Now, that doesn't mean a system put in this year is going to all of a sudden be old technology. What's going to happen is that I have that same solar panel, and that solar panel is 5 foot by 3 foot or 5.5 foot by 3 foot, and if we put it in today, it might be 290 watts. And if we were to install that in 5 years, that exact same panel, and I almost guarantee they're going to be the exact same dimensions in 5 years. The solar modules are the exact same dimension, but maybe it'll get, maybe 320 or something. And so it's not that that's where that efficiency is happening. It's just kind of slowly taking place over time. This panel should last 25 to 30 years or maybe more, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's just this that I can get maybe a little more out of the same size in a few years, but I don't think it's going to happen so dramatically that we're going to be really disappointed and want to go back and fix these things. We're going to leave them be. I can tell you that I've seen solar panels come off of houses that are 30, 40 years old. They refurbish them, make sure all the contacts are still good, and put them back on. And efficiency is not that great, but they're paid for, and so they're up there making money. We're going to talk about 3 different types of costs here. We're going to talk about direct capital costs, indirect capital costs, and then ongoing annual expenses. Direct capital costs are just those physical pieces of equipment. Indirect costs include labor, but also permitting. I had to get a building permit. I had to get an electrical permit. There might be sales tax included there. You may or may not have to have engineering. If you've got a system that is like a ground mount system on a fairly open area, a lot of times the engineering's already been done, versus if I have a unique system where maybe I'm putting it on a very unique deck or something like that, then I might have to have an engineer do the engineering. So there may or may not be those costs. Also depends on the city you're in, the county you're in, and what are their zoning and building rules. Ongoing annual expenses, insurance, operation and maintenance. Those are going to vary a lot, but the reality is O&M is going to be low on a well-installed solar array, but it's not going to be zero. So I don't like to say that it's zero, but I also don't like to say that it's going to be very big, because these systems are very boring in the fact that once you put them in, they can run a long time and you never have to mess with them. The components that things can happen, maybe an inverter has a problem or something, but those are under warranty so that they can get replaced fairly readily under warranty. And then again, your O&M is not very high. Actual O&M might happen if we had a hailstorm and we lost just 1 or 2 panels. We might have to replace those. They're pretty tough. They can handle pretty tough hailstorms, but it may happen. If it's a big hailstorm, your insurance is going to have to kick in. You're going to pay your deductible, and that could count towards O&M. So in that case, insurance, will insurance go up? Yes, no, maybe. All 3 are right. The reality is that in some insurance companies, it doesn't go up. Others it will, but it is part of the electrical system of your house, so you are insured for that system. But what happens is if you have a catastrophic event, if you didn't go into your insurance company and increase the overall coverage value of your house, then they may not be covered in that event. So you want to check with them before you get too far along. We're going to talk about these 4 things predominantly, and in the middle you've got what you paid for your system. And so what you paid for your system, we talked in terms of 2 to 3 per watt installed. So a 10 kilowatt system might cost, let's say $22,000, because that's between $2 and $3 a watt installed. So I'm at $22,000, but I can actually take a 30% tax credit, which cuts away at that $22,000. There may be other incentives. Some utilities have that, some won't, but everyone is going to be able to get this at least until 2019, and at which time it goes down a little bit. If you're a business, you can take depreciation, but then the energy savings is really what's going to start eating away at that and making it go well. So those energy savings are basically what energy it produces, and that's electricity you don't have to pay for. This is the business energy investment tax credit, which is effectively the same as the residential energy tax credit, where through 2019 it's equal to 30%, and then it starts to reduce down in future years. I did mention that if we're talking about small wind turbines, it expired at the end of 2016 and didn't get renewed, and so those economics of small wind got even worse than it was. Here's just a thing, you can read this on residential, but it's almost identical. Depreciation is a situation where if you're a business, you can take the cost of the system and depreciate it over time, thus reducing your taxable income, thus reducing your tax burden. And if you take the tax credit, which you will, you can't use that. So if my system costs $30,000 and I got a $10,000 tax credit, which is 30%, I can't take the depreciation on $30,000. I've got to take it on the $20,000. Now you can see that there is a 50% bonus depreciation if put in place for 2018. This is also something for your tax preparer to help with, but important to think about. And the depreciation is an important incentive when it comes to businesses. The USDA Rural Energy for America program. In my original presentation, I had Jeff Carpenter present this, but I wanted to talk to you about it, so I'll just go through it now. But the USDA Rural Energy for America program is for businesses and farms. And these businesses and farms, or in particular if the farm has to have 51% of its income come from the farm, so that you are considered a farm. But you have to be and this has to be a rural business. Rural meaning outside Lincoln, Omaha, Grand Island, if this is a Nebraska example. So under a town of 50,000. So if you're a rural business or farm, you can apply for the USDA REAP grant, which can qualify for up to 25% of the cost of the system. Now, it is important, you must apply for this prior to purchasing equipment. So if you're interested in this, and I suggest that if you do qualify, you do consider applying, though that doesn't guarantee that you'll get it. So when you do your economic analysis, do it with and without the grant, and you want to be happy with your system without the grant because you may not get it. And the reason you may not get it is not because it doesn't qualify, but because there's a limited amount of dollars for the grants. And so not everybody's going to get one. So, but it is an important piece, again, for rural businesses and farms. You apply through the USDA Rural Development, and they can take you through that process. But remember, do it before you purchase equipment. Let's go back and talk about real quick the Nebraska Energy Office Low Interest Loan Program. The Low Interest Loan Program gives loans to these types of systems and other systems to help you get into that system without having a large upfront cost, and that loan might be 2.5 to 3.5% in the loan rate, and it's basically the Energy Office helps get that rate down to a lower rate than maybe you could get otherwise, and why it can be a good deal. The paperwork for that is not too difficult, and you can get that and get this REAP grant as well. So it's not exclusive to one or the other, though it is a loan and not a grant. Net metering is an important policy with respect to making these systems economical, and I'm going to explain them in a little more detail here as we move forward. Net metering in Nebraska is a situation where it applies to solar, wind, methane, other renewables. It's limited to 25 kW capacity, meaning if you put in a system larger than that, you don't qualify for net metering. That doesn't mean you can't put it in. Remember, you can put it in under PURPA rules, but you don't get this net metering situation. The best way to describe net metering, let's see if we can do a sketch pad on the. The best way to describe net metering would be if I have my solar, it comes through my inverter, goes through my meter into my house like we had this is before, or out to the grid. Net metering would be a situation where through that month, through the billing period of time, the electricity is either going to flow from my solar into my house, it's going to flow from my solar out to the grid, or it's going to flow from the grid into my house. And it's going to do one or all those all at the same time, and it can do that. My meter, in the case of a bidirectional meter, is going to have two numbers on it. It's going to have the number of what goes out to the grid and what's coming from the grid. And so at the end of the month, and so we can imagine that being, this is A and this is B, and now we're going to look at my electricity bill. Here's my bill. My bill might say I have a base fee of, let's just throw a number out, $15 a month, and I pay that no matter what. So my house doesn't use anything, I still pay $15. There's my $15 bill. Then it says I have used X amount of energy, kilowatt hours, and those kilowatt hours cost 10 cents each. And so now we have to figure out how many kilowatt hours did I use. Well, now we're going to read my meter. That's what comes from the meter. But in my case, in the case of this net metering, we're going to say A minus B is equal to, in this case, X kilowatt hours. And so if we have a situation where I used 600 kilowatt hours from the grid, but I gave back to the grid in B 400 kilowatt hours, my bill would be 200 kilowatt hours. You notice that that 400 was, so this is actually B, sorry about that, this is B minus A. So this is B and A. And that A went onto the grid and somebody else used them. But I got full value for it. These are 10 cents, these are worth 10 cents a piece. And so my bill is 200. And that's really what net metering is it says that that I get full credit even if that electricity goes on the grid and somebody else used it. And that's why it's a net metering situation. Now, if there was a month that maybe I had very good sun and I didn't use very much electricity, maybe I was on vacation, and so I used 400 kilowatt hours that month, and I gave to the grid 600, my bill would be negative 200, and that negative 200, by the rules in Nebraska, are not worth 10 cents each. They're worth a avoided cost. Yet avoided cost is an odd term because it's defined fairly broadly by different utilities, and I'll say it's a lesser rate than retail rate, maybe somewhere between 2 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So let's just meet in the middle and call that worth 3 cents. Those are worth 3 cents each. 3 times 200 is 500, or $5. So now my bill, I've got $5. That $5 goes back on, and I suppose you could just say it. My total bill is $10 because I took 5 off, so my total bill that month would be $10. So I rolled that. I got credit for my $5 versus credit for kilowatt hours. If this was the state of Iowa, it'd be slightly different, where then I would just take this negative 200 and I would roll the negative 200 over to the next month. That's what they do in some states. Our state, we settle up at the end of every billing period and do it that way. Net metering is really meant to offset the load of your house, and so really you don't want to overgenerate if you can help it, because like I said, these kilowatt hours are not worth full retail rate if I overproduce. So the more you can get them to be worth full retail rate, the better the economics are, and thus it's really not the best to overgenerate very much. All right, let's go back and talk a little bit more about net metering. Let's finish with net metering. If you have a situation where you have excess at the end of the year, which hopefully you don't, but if you do, then they actually pay that out as maybe a check to you at the end of the year. There could be a time in the future where that utility puts on enough net metering customers that they meet 1% of their peak monthly demand, at which time the next net metering customer, or the next customer that wants to put in a renewable system under the net metering, they may not get to net meter. And so that's up to the utility to decide if they're going to stop net metering at that point or not. But they are allowed to stop after 1%. They reach 1% of their peak demand. Though most utilities aren't even close to that. But there are a few that are getting a little closer. I talked to a utility the other day that I was surprised how close they were. I think they were, 20 or 30% of the way to their 1%, which was surprising to me that they were that high. So I could see in maybe the next few years that utility might reach that 1%, and thus they'll decide whether they're going to net meter beyond that. Different states allow different maximum sizes for net metering. You can see that Iowa is 500, that Kansas, it varies. But what happens is, like in Iowa, they have both public utilities and private utilities. And so for private utilities, it's 500. For public utilities, it's a different number. And so that's where there's this little asterisk by that. Nebraska, we're all public utilities, it's just 25 at the moment. Though there is a bill in the legislature currently to try to raise that to 100. Depending on when you're watching this, you can look back into 2017 and decide if that passed or didn't pass. This is where we talked about your electric bill. The electric bill is a great place to start this process. Pick up your electric bill, really look at it, understand how much you use on an annual basis and how you're charged. The fixed charge is that fixed fee. It might be between $8 and $35. It's actually quite varied across the state right now, but there is always going to be some type of fixed charge. The energy charge is what you're paying per kilowatt hour, and many utilities have a multi-level rate where that might be a winter-summer rate where it's lower in the winter and more in the summer. They also might have a rate for the first 1,000 kilowatt hours you use in a month, and then it's a lower rate for more use. So you have these different tiers that you can deal with. That's also where you should be able to find that in your electric bill or from your electric utility. It helps you understand how much are those kilowatt hours worth. Electricity prices are going up over time, and that's true, and it's going to continue to be true. Electricity is very useful, and we're going to keep generating it, and it costs to generate it no matter what we generate it from. And so it's gone up in Nebraska at about 2.2% per year. It's gone up in the United States about 2% a year, so very similar. You can see the average retail price for electricity in the United States is higher than Nebraska's average, so we have a little bit lower average. And I was actually looking at these numbers the other day, and let me draw on here. The next dot on here would be 2016, and Nebraska is on this just slight uptick trend, and so that's not too bad. I'm going to Michigan here in a little while, and I was looking at theirs, and theirs is sitting about up here. So our average retail prices are low compared to much of the United States, but it's increasing. So when we look at our economics, we have to consider that electricity is going to be more expensive in the future, and we shouldn't assume that it's going to stay the same forever, because it's not. What affects production? Obviously, shading affects production. System orientation, panel tilt, panel degradation, things like that. So let's talk about some of those a little bit. Let's go back to our sketch pad, and we'll look at this. If we were to say that this direction is south, and we put our panels at an angle here, the sun is going to be very low in the sky in the wintertime and very high in the sky in the summertime, and that's why that panel tilt, to maximize it for an entire year in Nebraska, somewhere between maybe 35 to 40 degrees is a good tilt. I like to tell people, though, if we have a choice on a ground mount system, we might put that at a 35 to 40 degree tilt. If we have a roof, for example, where I've got the roof of my house, we are going to want to put those solar panels on the whatever pitch the roof of the house is. And the reason is it's going to look the best. So that's why that is. We really don't want to put that solar panel at a different angle than the house, because it looks odd, it increases wind load, and it's just not the best deal. So let's not do that. We could have a system where we tilted it, and where you could tilt it to the east in the morning, to the west in the afternoon, and we could have it track. Again, tracking is great. You're going to increase your efficiency by some percent, but I don't really like trackers because they're moving parts, and moving parts break down. And I repeat, moving parts break down, add O&M, and I'm just not sure that that's what we want. Solar's greatest attribute is that it's boring. And what I mean by boring is it just sits there and works, and it does not have any moving parts. That is a great attribute, so let's not mess it up and add moving parts unless we are willing to maintain them. All right, shading effects. Shading effects are a bad deal. I mean, obviously that makes sense. Sun, solar panels need sun. I want to just draw a real quick thing here to show you something. If I have my solar panels, and I have a bunch of solar panels here, and I wired them together, and so I wired these together in series, and these together in series, and then these together in parallel and to my inverter, and then I went over and I shaded this because I had a tree that was sitting over here, and then that thing got shaded, and it shaded just that little thing right there, and all of a sudden I got rid of all of those in series, and half my production went away because I shaded a little bit. Now there's ways to avoid that. One way to avoid that is, well, first of all, we need to understand that, do I have shading or don't I, before we design the system? And if we have shading, then we would design the system, and we would either use microinverters and have individual inverters, or we'd use optimizers, and then when we shaded that, I only lost that one panel, and I wouldn't lose all of them. So there's ways to get around that, but it's really important to understand if I have shading and what effect that might have. Panel degradation is typical, where we're going to get a little degradation over time, but 0.5% per year is basically what they're warranted for, to have that or less. So, a panel that's 30 years old is going to not generate like it's brand new, but it's going to still do, about 80% of that. So they do pretty well. Here's just an example where if I face a system east, for example, I would produce 13% less than if I faced it south. And again, this is where I've got to decide, is that 13% enough? And this is where the economics are going to kick in. Is it doesn't matter that it's 13% less if the economics are still right, but if it hurts the economics to lose that 13%, that's a problem. And so those are things we can determine. The nice thing about this, though, is we can model all these things before we install it. We don't have to install it and find these things out. Taxation in the state of Nebraska, if it's owned by a customer generator, then it's exempt from the nameplate capacity tax and the real property tax. So we don't have to pay property tax on these systems, which is good. Now, your assessed value and the property tax you pay because of the assessed value of your home, that's another story where that really is up to your assessor. When I spoke to 2 or 3 assessors about this particular topic, they said it may or may not change the valuation, and then they should take in the sales of houses that have similar systems on them, and if that increases the price of the sales, then yes, you would increase your price of. But if it didn't, then no, it shouldn't. But you and I know that your county assessor may or may not change your valuation based on this. And so the assessors that I talked to assured me it should be based on sales of houses, but I don't know if that'll happen or not. Pre-tax and post-tax, this is something to talk about a little bit, which would be to think about if I'm a business and I'm taking a tax credit and reducing my taxable income based on the expenses I have on electricity for my business, and I put in solar and now I don't have those expenses, I can't write those expenses off, thus my taxes go up. And so I've got to take that into account, that I'm saving on electricity, which is great, but I don't also have that to be able to write off on my taxes. So we want to consider those types of things when we're considering this for a business. This is not necessarily something we can do for a residence, but for a business. Let's talk about these different types of solar economic pieces, and it's important to understand that not one of these is a perfect way to look at economics of solar, though I think that payback period and net present value are my 2 favorite. The others have value as well, but I think that you want to look at more than one to understand how the system economics fare. Again, back to the goals. The economics are only as important as how do they relate to your goals. And so think about your goals of your system before you get too far, because if you don't want to be disappointed. You don't want to think that this is going to pay itself off in 5 years just to have it pay itself off in 8. And so you need to be realistic about what are your goals. Is 8 years good enough? And I like to calculate things in a range. I never say that the payback period is this number of years because that hasn't happened yet. It's going to be likely between this number and this number, and we'll do some of those calculations in a minute. Payback period, just a period of time it takes to recoup the funds. Very simple. We can do a costs over production times the value of electricity minus O&M. Super simple, but it doesn't take into account that the price of electricity goes up over time, that there's a time value of money, the variability of electrical pricing, and other things. So we got to be a little careful with that, and simple payback's a great way to start, but again, we may want to add in some complexity like the escalation of electricity price. Rate of return, this is similar to other investments. You'd say I could, for this investment I make $7 or 7% a year. We can calculate those investment options if that's what you're interested in. Net present value takes into account the fact that money spent today has less value than money in the future, or has more value, than money in the future, because that's money I have here and I could invest in some other investment. So I take into account that time value of money using a discount rate, and a positive net present value is good. A negative net present value is not so good, and so you'll want to look at that. How high you want that to be, that depends on the way you want your investments to pay back and other things, but I do like net present value as a way to look at it. Levelized cost of energy, which would be just simply taking the cost of my system divided by the cost of electricity, and I can kind of figure out what that total cost of energy is over the life of the system. But I do warn you that you really only want to use levelized cost of electricity to compare like systems to like systems. So a renewable that is intermittent in nature and isn't on all the time, like solar, compare solar to solar. Solar to wind is somewhat okay, but you don't want to compare the levelized cost of solar to the levelized cost of, say, nuclear power or coal-fired power plant that can be turned on at any time and is dispatchable in that way. So the costs aren't quite the same. It's tempting to make those comparisons, but be very careful and compare like sources to like. Electricity prices increase, but how much? The Energy Information Agency says 1.4 to 3.6% annually. Now I also have to say that there is an inflation rate of about 2.5% of just normal inflation, and so we have to think about, is the inflation rate of electricity above that, and how much above it is that taking place. So we do have to, I definitely want to put in some inflation, but I don't want it to be too high. Otherwise, we're not being conservative enough, and we don't want to overestimate that and have it not happen. Here's some of the fun stuff we're going to talk about quick, and that is that these two models are a fun way to get started after you've looked at your electricity bill and done some of that stuff. Is get online, go to Pvwatts. It's done by the National Renewable Energy Lab, and then once you're more serious, this is the one to start with. And then once you're more serious, download the System Advisor model and play with that. So let's go ahead and give some of those a try. So let's go to let's go ahead and go out to a website and go to Pvwatts. So I'm going to go to Pvwatts, and that's an NREL website, so National Renewable Energy Lab. And here is a fairly simple website. So let's type in something. Let's just do Omaha, Nebraska. And what we're looking for first is we're looking for weather data. And so we're just going to pick a weather data from a location. So let's pick that one. That's a good weather data piece. So that helps us model the system. Now there's couple ways to do it. We can pick the size of our system here in the center, or we can pick, actually draw on a roof. We can actually go into a map and draw on a roof, and it'll estimate how big the system is. So if we were doing, let's make a system that is about 6 kW DC in size. I'm going to leave a lot of these things as they are, standard modules, because the premium ones are expensive, so standard are pretty common. It is going to be a roof mount. This is mainly for the economics, but and again, I don't like the economics on the Pvwatts model all that well, but we'll select that. System losses 14%. That's a pretty good number. Tilt, we got to depend. This is a roof mount, so what's the pitch of our roof? 20 degrees is about a 412 pitch, so we're going to leave it at 20 degrees. Azimuth, which direction are we facing? Is our roof facing directly south? I'm going to say it is facing directly south. and we're going to go on and look at what it'll produce. That system is estimated to produce 7,479 kilowatt hours per year. And so per month, you can see that the best months are the months of June and July. Actually, the month of May is the best in their estimation for that location. And you can see their estimate of energy value. I don't know where they're getting their kilowatt hour prices for this. So this is where I don't like those numbers all that well. But over here, that number is going to be pretty darn close. You get a year like 2012 there was no rain, it was sunny all the time. It's going to be 100 or 200 kilowatt hours above that. If we have a year that's more rainy, we're going to be 100 or 200 kilowatt hours below that, but that's a pretty darn good number, and it's going to be pretty darn close to correct. So this modeling software has done a good job with respect to that. Let's look, let's go to our system advisor model. I'm going to open the System Advisor model, which I've downloaded. I went to nrel.gov. I downloaded the System Advisor model. I had to register so that they'll send me, update emails. So I've done all that. I'm going to start a new project. In this case, I'm going to call it a Pvwatts residential, but this has got a lot more detail than the one we just ran. And I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to have we're just going to follow down these tabs on the side, and we're going to fill them all in. And so we're going to start, and we're going to get our weather data again. And we're going to search Omaha, Nebraska, and we're going to get our weather data. There's our weather data right there. And once we've selected it, we should be able to just go on to the next one. I think when we go back, it'll still be there. Yep, Omaha. So we go on to our system. We had our system is 6 kW, which might be about 20 to 24 modules in size. Those are some of the things we're going to leave standard. Remember, this is going to be a roof mount, and it's going to be 20 degrees facing south. We're going to leave these things standard. We're going to move on to the system costs. I told you earlier that systems should cost somewhere between $2 and $3 a watt installed. This $2.93 I think is a little high, so we're going to, I want this number down here to be lower, so I'm just going to change these so that it's lower. It doesn't matter what I'm changing right now, but I'm just changing them so that that's lower. I'm at 262. Now we're going to say maybe 0.8 and see what that gets us down to 216 per watt DC. I think that's in the ballpark of what can be done today. So lifetime degradation, I'm going to leave that as standard. Financial parameters, this is where we're going to decide if we're going to borrow this money or not. I'm going to borrow it for 10 years at 3.5% interest because I'm going to go to the Nebraska Energy Office and get that. I'm going to analyze it for 25 years. Inflation rate 2.5%. I think this. I'm going to change that discount rate a little down. Insurance. I think that based on the insurance that I've looked up, I don't think it's quite that high. Let's say 0.25. These are things that I have learned to change. And property tax, remember, we don't have property tax, so we're going to change that to 0. We're going to leave the rest of that the same. That's okay for now. Incentives, we get our 30% tax credit. That's already in there, so we're in good shape. If your utility has other incentives, you can put those in. We could also then put in the USDA REAP grant if we had that. We're not going to have it because we are talking about a residential system that doesn't qualify for the REAP grant. Electricity rates. This is where we're going to have fun. We're going to go in here and we're going to give it a second because it's going to communicate with this website, and this website's been slow recently. So now we're going to search OPPD. There's OPPD's rates, and we can choose from all their different selections. So we're going to choose their residential service, and this is where we're going to say download and apply rates, and it applied the rate. This is where it's fun. The fixed monthly charge is $9.85. That may not be updated to what's happening in OPPD right now with their increasing in the fixed monthly charge, but that may not have taken place yet. That may be coming. But you can see that what they have is a multi-tier rate in 2 different periods. So it looks like they have a summertime period, which might be this period 2. Everything is 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and then maybe a wintertime period where it's somewhere between 6 and 10 cents a kilowatt hour, where the first 100 costs 10 cents, the second 900 costs 9 cents, and after 1,000 kilowatt hours costs 6 cents. So the more you use, the less it is, and so you can kind of understand your rates a little bit. So that's kind of fun. This is where I'm going to put in my escalation rate. Remember, I don't like to be put this in very high. I'm going to put it in as 1.5% a year. Just for fun, let's change this to, I don't know, $25, just because I think that monthly charge should be a little higher because I know it's going up. Now we're going to change our load. This is where you'd put in the data for your house, and to put that data in for your house, you're going to go ahead and hit normalize by the month, and then you're going to edit the data, and you're just going to write your values in, right? I'm going to use whatever generic house that they threw in. It's using 6,000 kilowatt hours a year. That's a pretty efficient house. Mine uses about 9,000. But this is where you'd actually put in your monthly bills. And so what I like to do is go back maybe 3 or 4 years if you have them, and make averages per month, and then put those numbers in. Now we're going to hit simulate, and it's going to give us the numbers. And we can see here that our payback period is 12.7 years. So that's our payback period with the things that we assumed. I like to tell people that payback period is going to be somewhere between 9 and 14 years for a lot of the calculations that I've been doing in Nebraska recently. This system should last 25 to 30 years, and you're going to have to decide if that's good enough for you. The net present value is, again, one we talked about that I like. It's just under $4,000, so that's positive, so that's a good thing. We can see the levelized cost of energy at just under 7 cents. So you could say, well, my electricity is 7 cents. It's costing less than what I'm paying from the utility. But that's, again, comparing something that's available all the time to something that's not available all the time. It's not really all that good a comparison. So we got to be careful with that. Let's play with this just a little bit. So if we go into the financial parameter or the incentives and say, what if this was a small business, and what if we got a 25% federal grant or grant for that, and then we're going to hit simulate, and all of a sudden our payback, we got to go back and see that. It doesn't look quite right. Oh, capacity based, that's not right. So we want a federal tax of 25%. So let's hit simulate. That now our payback period is 10 years. So you can see that it's better with that REAP grant, actually quite a bit better with that REAP grant, but we may or may not get it. So we need to be happy without it before we move forward with this system. Now, you just saw where I put the thing in the wrong place. This program is very good, but it has got lots and lots and lots of places to put stuff in, and it can get you thinking wrong. It also can be used to kind of be a little tricky, because I can actually run scenarios that are make things look very, very rosy. This cash flow is a fun one. You can say, where am I spending the money? I'm spending it on O&M. Actually, O&M might be a little high on this, so I'm going to go to my financial parameters, system costs actually, and I'm going to change my O&M. I think that might be a little bit high across time, so we're going to change that to maybe, let's say, $10, and then we'll simulate again, go back to our summary, 9.4 years. That's where, again, with the REAP grant and with that little bit less O&M. So you can actually see and do a lot of things in this system. Let's go back to our presentation and get it finished out. There's our Pvwatts calculator. This is one I ran, and you can see this is using some very conservative estimations, and I have a 14-year payback and just a not real great net present value of $400, but I'm being conservative. I am not assuming I got the REAP grant. I'm assuming a fairly low increase in electricity rates, things like that. Here, I added the REAP grant. It got quite a bit better. My net present value got quite a bit better, but I can't assume I get that REAP grant. So I've already between 9 and 14 years in payback. So there's my range for this particular system, and I ran a fairly simple business system on this this run. Here's when I get aggressive, and here's where we have to be careful. If someone comes to you and they say, look, these things are amazing, 5-year payback, you've got it. Well, what assumptions are they making? You know, in this case, I assumed I'm not paying anything for insurance, I'm not paying anything for O&M, I got the REAP grant, I got the federal tax credit, electricity rates are going up at 4% a year, over inflation, so 6% a year, and it's not right. It's not wrong, but it's not right. And so that's where we got to be a little careful, and I like to be a little more conservative when I run the numbers. This is just an example of some scenarios a student ran a few years ago, and where there are states that don't have the net metering laws, and without the net metering law, you can see that the payback on these systems was not very good when you didn't have net metering. Anywhere you did have net metering, these other states, it was much better. But you can see that states that have their own state incentives have much lower paybacks. But what is interesting is that net present value is higher in Denver, even though the payback is less. And that is because the solar resource in Denver is a lot better than cloudy Eugene, Oregon. So solar resource is important, but it doesn't overcome everything when it comes to economics. But it definitely does help, and it helps definitely in the long term because production was higher. Here's some things from a publication that I did with worked on with some cohorts of mine from Ohio and Wyoming, and you can read through those. This is a picture of me, and if you have any questions, here's my information. But I will tell you, if you're interested in finding an installer for this system, one thing you could do is go to Nebraskans for Solar, which is a nonprofit. They're an advocacy group, but they maintain a pretty good list of installers. You can look for installers that are near you, and then you're going to ask a few questions to try to understand if they're a good installer. So here's a list of those questions. Number one, how many have they installed? Number of installations. Number of installs. How many have they done? Get a sense of that. The more they've done, the more skilled they are, hopefully. Number two, you want to see those. You want to see an installation. Drive by or even maybe stop and talk to the homeowner, see if they had a good experience, right? Those are very, very important pieces to it. And so now you've got number one and number two, and I've got an experienced installer, or I don't have an experienced installer. I've got one that has happy customers, or one that he's having trouble finding a customer for me to talk to. You're going to learn a lot about those installers just in those things. Now, there's other questions that you can ask that just lend themselves to their level of knowledge. One that you don't even have to know the answer to, but you say, what's new in the 2014 electric code? For solar. And you ask them that question. What's new in 2014 electric code for solar? And if they can't answer that question off the top of their head, or can't get to that information very rapidly, that's not good. That's not good, right? Installing a system to code in a safe fashion that that should last a long time. So a very good installation is critically important to having this system pay itself off. And solar has a very good track record of functioning and working for a long period of time, but it's that good installation is very critical, and knowing that electric code is a critical piece to that. And one of the reasons that it's challenging for many individuals to do this themselves. I definitely don't say that you can't, but definitely say you got to know the code, you got to be able to do it right. And that's where an installer a lot of times can help you get through that. Now, if there's parts of it you think you can do for yourself, I mean, you saw I built all my my structural things and stuff like that. If you think you can do that, great. But work with your installer. They may be able to do it at a good price as well. So consider those things. And consider asking the installer lots of questions, and talk to multiple installers. That'll help you as well understand who's good. So anyway, if you have any questions, check out my website, send me an email, give me a call. I'd love to visit with you.